everyone. We're back. Wow, that was some echo. Gotta love when that happens the first time in a month. Hey, it is Friday, April 30th, and after about a month off, we are back with Litvak Leadership Live. So I've got my special guest here today, Joseph G. Cross, or Joe Cross, depending upon how you know him. Let's get some housekeeping stuff out of the way. If you like interviews like this, like what we have to say, go on to Facebook and YouTube and like and subscribe to the channel. We're going to have a website up soon, but you can find out about our weekly at 4 p.m. Friday interviews every single week on Litvak Leadership on Facebook and on YouTube. So today, I want to welcome to the show Joseph G. Cross, author of Concrete and Gold. How are you today, Joseph?
I am doing fantastic. How are you?
I am having a great day. It's the first time I'm getting to interview someone in a month. I've been so buried in my job. I'm excited for the new format and to talk to you. I've got your book right here, Concrete and Gold. Let's throw it up here for everyone to see. You can go to Joe's website, josephgcross.com, and you can purchase the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and I'm sure other places also. But I'll tell you, I've been digging into this book. I'm on page 83 of 140 some odd pages, and I really like what Joseph has to say. So, Joe, let me ask you first, what was your inspiration for writing the book?
Well, to be honest with you, the inspiration for writing the book were the people that I get the privilege to lead. When they were giving me feedback about leadership, I just always thought that the way that I lead is the way that I lead. But they were telling me that there was something different. And so as I dove into what that is and talking to them, I realized that there was something missing in the leadership landscape of places where I had been led before. I've had great leaders, I've had not so great leaders, and I've had everything in between. And so I looked back to where I learned how I lead, and basically what was missing in a lot of places, not everywhere, but in a lot of places, what's missing is simply the golden rule. And that's really where this inspiration to write this book came from.
Okay. So when you were looking at it, I would ask you, what does leadership mean to you? But I think you really talk about it in the types of leaders, that there's concrete and gold leaders. So how do you define that?
Well, in my research, I came across some, all these different types of leaders that that the leadership landscape will say that there are. And there were really, you could narrow it down into 7 categories. You had autocratic, which is, do as I say. You had authoritative, which is like your visionary leader. You had a pace-setting leader, which really sets the bar, pushes their team to go there. You had a democratic leader, which really involves their team in almost every decision they ask them before. You had your coaching type of leader who likes to teach. Your affiliative type of leader who's really relational at their core. And then your laissez-faire leader, which, that kind of explains itself. They just kind of let whatever happen. But as I looked at those, I said, really, every great leader should be able to encapsulate all of those styles. So to me, those weren't leadership types of leaders. Those were more leadership styles. And so to me, there's really only 2 kinds of leaders. There's a concrete leader who has one style, and they say, my way or the highway. This is how I lead. If you don't like it, you can't be on this team. And then there's a golden leader who can look at their team, look at their situation, and actually adjust their leadership style for the best outcome for the team, the organization, and the situation at hand. That doesn't mean that they're a weak leader. That just means that they understand how to lead in every situation.
So, and when I hear you describe it that way, and when I posted a video promoting this yesterday, I stated, part of me really likes being a concrete leader. And for a long time in my career, I was very much, look, I'm in charge. I was given this authority. I am going to mentor you on how to be successful. You should do things this way. And it wasn't until I started working with people closer to my own age, actually, and I'd gotten some, the time under my belt, that I realized I needed to listen to what others had to say more often than not. What do you say to those older generational leaders that are still out there that are completely concrete leaders, and they're wondering why they're frustrated?
Well, we all want to be a concrete leader in the way that we best felt led, right? We want to lead in the way that we understand the best. And sometimes it can be scary to venture into places where we're not as well versed. But I think the leadership landscape has changed over the last decade or two, where now, instead of the boss, whatever the boss says is right, it's more, let's do this together. And I think you get more buy-in. You get, what's the word that I'm looking for here? You get people who are more committed to your organization's mission, to your vision as the leader of an organization or the leader of a team, whenever you find common values and you actually exercise those strengths. And so let me put it this way. If you're a coach in the major leagues and you've got somebody who's a 10-year veteran, or somebody who just came up from, training camp or whatever, you're going to coach them differently in the batting cages.
Sure.
And so you're going to want to build rapport with that new guy. He doesn't know you at all. He respects your position as the coach, but he doesn't know you. He doesn't understand the way that you coach yet. Whereas you've got rapport with the guy that's been there 10 years, and you can maybe be a little more straightforward with him. Maybe you coach him in a different way. And so understanding who you're leading, understanding the situation that you're leading in, is invaluable to every single leader out there. And that's what golden leaders are. Concrete is very sturdy. It's very rigid. It provides a really good foundation. And gold is soft. It's malleable. But concrete's also $150 a square yard, whereas gold is priceless, right? Depending on what you have.
So we got Shannon here saying that he is definitely a concrete leader. He's got a big smile on his face. I'm going to assume this is a new profile picture upload, that he's happy he's a concrete leader. What would you say to Shannon about putting a little gold into his leadership style?
I would say to Shannon that you already have gold in your leadership style. You just have to find it. And so we can put up walls around our leadership style, but ultimately we want the best for our organization. We want the best for our teams. We don't want high turnover. We don't want team members to leave, because that costs organizations money to bring on new people, to train new people. But he just put, I've learned to hire people that are smarter than I am and to get out of their way. And that's golden leadership right there. I think in some way we're all concrete, and in some way we can find gold within ourselves with our leadership style. And so people have gifts, and I'm not gifted at everything that I do. My leader is extremely gifted at organization. I'm not. It stresses me out like you would not believe. But I can do logistics. You give me a project and I'll give you all the logistics just like that, whereas that stresses her out. So we all have giftings. We all have things that we're good at. And when we empower others to lead in their giftings, in their strength, and we can understand how to lead them, then that's where golden leadership starts. You have to understand who you're leading. So
there is a philosophy that I think is in conflict. Mm-hmm. That there are some people who are more concrete leaders that think that it's yes, it's a discussion, but ultimately a decision has to be made. And if there's not buy-in from a team, there's issues. I mean, I sat on a senior leadership team at an organization at one time, and the thing that we struggled with as a group is that we would bicker amongst ourselves in our senior leadership meeting. Mm-hmm. And we made the commitment that once we left that meeting, we would all be unified. But inevitably, someone at a different time would be like, well, I don't agree with that. I mean, how do you get people to stick with the senior leadership commitment for one another and be able to then show the gold flexibility to their individual teams. Am I making sense in what I'm asking you?
Yeah, you're talking about carrying vision is what you're talking about, carrying the vision of senior leadership. And, if your culture isn't everything, then your vision is nothing. And so what I would say to that is you've got to define your culture. You've got to look into your culture. Every organization has a visible and an invisible culture. Your visible culture is what everybody sees. I served at a church one time where their visible culture was immaculate. Everybody thought they had it all together. But behind the scenes, their invisible culture was toxic. I mean, really toxic. And it wasn't very long before that toxicity bled into the visible culture. If your visible culture is good, that doesn't necessarily mean your invisible culture is good. But if your visible culture is toxic, I guarantee you that your invisible culture is toxic. And vice versa. If your invisible culture is good, your visible culture is going to be good. And so you really have to pay attention to your invisible culture. What's happening behind the scenes? How are your leaders leading the teams? How are they carrying vision? Because if your culture isn't everything, then your teams aren't really going to carry the vision. There's a line in the book that I put, people will either talk openly with their leaders or privately about their leaders. And I believe that. I believe that because people are going to vent. But when you create a safe environment for someone to be heard, they're going to vent to you and they're going to say, hey, this is something that I'm noticing. It's not right, or maybe it is right, but we can do it better. And they're going to feel safe to come to their leaders and talk about it. If you don't create that safe environment, then you're going to have bickering amongst your team. You're going to have gossip, and your team isn't going to be fully bought into what your organization's doing.
One thing that I can tell you that I have struggled with, and I talk a lot about my experiences in leadership and on the show, trying to be as transparent as possible, is having that non-work connection with those that I am leading, because I've seen where people just become best buddies with someone that they're leading, and then occasionally they need to have a critical conversation that someone is going to be very unhappy about and be carrying a cardboard box full of their belongings out to the car. How do you leverage that relational influence to better connect, as you talk about in the book, with those you lead, but at the same time, not take down that wall that I'm defining here, not you, that wall of professional relationship?
Yeah. That's tough. I think the leadership landscape of, years and years and decades ago, which I wasn't a part of, but let's say my dad's industry, when I talked to him about the content in this book, he said, well, that's not how we've always done it. And I said, I understand, but I think it's shifted. I think it's changed. I think leaders and teams do life together now, and they want to know that they have a leader who cares about them. I was sitting in a truck ride to lunch with a leader of mine years ago, and he was asking me, how's your church going? I was a high-level volunteer at our church. He said, how's your church going? I said, man, it's so great. We're growing. We're doing this. We're doing this. And he said, can I be honest with you? Every time that you talk about your church, all I think about is how much work you're not getting done. And what that did was that broke a wall.
I remember when I read that.
Yeah, it literally broke down some trust. And if you don't have trust is the currency of leadership. If you don't have trust, then you can't make deposits or transactions. And so that, to me, when you have somebody that you trust, that trusts you, they understand that when you do have to have that crucial conversation, that you're not doing it out of malice or anything like that. You're doing it because you believe in them. My leader here at the church, our senior pastor, he'll tell me, or he tells everybody that, hey, if I'm not talking to you about in ways that you can get better, then that means that it's not good for you. But if I am telling you, here's a way that you can get better, here's something that I noticed in that we need to get better at, he said, well, I'm investing in you. And so whenever you have that relational equity, that trust with your team, then when you have to have those crucial conversations, they understand your heart. They know because your actions back it up that, hey, this didn't go the way it was planned, or hey, you said this, but we got this. We need to get it better. And, accountability is a real thing. Just because you're relationally invested into somebody doesn't mean you can't hold them accountable. It just means that when you hold them accountable, they are more bought in instead of going, you know what, I don't need this, I'm out. They understand that it's for the greater good of the organization.
And I know that Joe talks here. I'm speaking directly to the audience a lot about his role in the church being bivocational. And truth be told, there was a period of time in my life where I was bivocational also. And the examples I just want to throw out that Joe may be giving about the church with clean in front, toxic in back. If anyone out there is thinking, oh, really? Look at the church like that? Yeah, go look at a company you've worked for. Okay, because those type of situations occur everywhere, and it's about culture and relationship.
Yeah, I didn't say that in any way to downplay the church or to say anything bad about it. I work for a thriving church, but the thing is churches are businesses too. And there's a culture. I say that in a business format. I'm not talking about how the church presented what they believed in or anything like that. I'm talking about purely from a business standpoint. There was toxicity in the leadership model. And so that's what I was talking about there. And so, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. That's not indicative of any one church at all. I think we all struggle with that at some point in every organization.
Absolutely. So when you say relationships are the foundation of almost everything in life, I want to look at it within the prism of as you rise up through an organization and become a leader of, for lack of that is captaining the ship in a greater way, setting culture, setting vision. Do you see that those leaders end up becoming closer to one another, or are they more siloed in their own individual roles to ensure that the mission is accomplished?
I think that you see them become closer to their team. To be honest with you, I think silos are the worst thing for any organization. Whenever you compartmentalize information and you hold it from another part of the organization or another team, then you're only doing a disservice to yourself. Alan Mullally, he was the CEO of Ford for a while, and I got to hear him speak at a conference just recently, and he talked about this. He said, we had information, but the right people weren't getting the information because it was so convoluted, and people were thinking that if they shared this information, they were going to get in trouble because it wasn't, exactly what everybody wanted. Maybe this system failed, but they would just keep doing a failed system because they didn't want to get in trouble and they weren't getting information across. So he changed that. He said, no, we need to make everything visible. And he tells the story of one guy who could not get on with the culture. He said, I cannot buy into this. This is not how we've been doing it. And I just simply can't buy into this. And it's funny. He said, well, that's okay. That's all right. And the guy said, really? He said, yeah, you don't have to get on board with this. You don't work here anymore, but it's okay that you feel that. He's like, I hold no resentment against you, but this is the way that our organization is going to work. And if you don't value that, then this isn't the right place for you. And I want the right place for you. And, he said it out of love. And so that was a crucial conversation that he had to have with somebody that reported to him. But the end result was that guy no longer worked there because this was the way that the organization was going. And so, yes, I believe that relationships are the foundation of almost everything in life. And that example right there, he had to let somebody go who was a key member of his team, but they had a good relationship. And he said, look, I want the best for you. And so that's why you're not going to work here anymore, because you're just going to be frustrated the whole time. And so, yeah. Hope that answers the question.
I want to talk about two. I'm going to flash one banner, modeling behavior, because I really think it's related to this banner, the team leading them to a place where they can replace you. Now, for all the flaws that, I think we're all our own worst critic. And if we're not our own worst critic, then we're just lying to ourselves. At least that's my personal philosophical approach. Whether people agree with it or not, I'm concreting on myself. But when I look at the hires that I have made over the years, I was always looking for people that were better than me, more gifted than me in at least one area. Because if I could not learn something from them, how, they were going to be a project. Is that wrong that I didn't want to hire someone that I was better at everything than they were, and it would be a project to get them to replace me? I wanted someone that was better at least one, even two or more things than I was, because then I should be able to say, here is your project, go do.
Yep. See, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room.
Absolutely.
Every time. Because a leader who is not growing is a leader that's stagnant, and stagnant water stinks. I don't want to be around a leader who is not committed to growth. Because if they're not committed to growth and I am, well, then I'm going to outpace them. And as a leader, you cannot be afraid of leading someone so well that they can do your job better than you. You can't be afraid of that. That's a testament to your good leadership. When somebody comes up and does a better job than you, well, that's fine. Because then that's how you get promoted, to be honest with you, is when you can replace yourself.
So when you look at being gold, especially during this past year of COVID, and yes, people, if you're hearing dogs barking, that is my home. Obviously, my wife just got home. We take down the fourth wall here at Litvak Leadership, but we're real. Yeah. When you look at this past year, where people were locked down and people are getting out now, but in some places they're not, in other places that they are, how do you see that people had the opportunity to grow and be able to get influence to allow themselves to grow and influence others to help them in growth? Because we've really entered into a completely different way of life, both personally and professionally.
Oh, yeah. You're going to have influence no matter where you go. Every single person, every single leader brings influence. You have to decide what kind of influence you're bringing. Are you bringing good influence, or are you bringing bad influence? And in this last year, we've had the opportunity, to sit at home and work from home. Some of us haven't. Some of us, essential workers, and God bless y'all for everything that y'all do. But our church shut down for multiple months. I'm trying to think, probably 4 months. And we worked from home. Being on the production side, I had a lot more to do because everything went digital. Everything was online. But we had opportunities to grow because now we got to learn to lead in a new way. And so that influence that we bring, we could either sit back and go, you know what, I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to learn to lead in a new way. I just not going to have the contact with the team that I had before whenever we were all in the office. Or you can have the positive influence of going, you know what, I'm going to learn how to do this. And then you come back to the office, go back to your organization with new skills. Maybe your organization isn't back yet. Maybe y'all are still doing remote, or maybe your organization has decided not to come back, and we can do this whole thing from home and cut some overhead. And there's no problem with that, but you've got to keep your relational equity up. You've got to keep your positive influence up. And COVID presented an opportunity for us to learn how to do that. Really, it forced us to learn how to do that in many ways. And so that's the answer I would have to that one. You're going to bring influence no matter where you are or who you are. Even if you are the lowest man on the totem pole, lowest woman on the totem pole, you will have influence, and you can lead from the bottom. You can lead from the top, and you can lead from the middle. And so what influence are you bringing? Are you bringing positive influence? Are you teaching? Are you growing? Are you inspiring others to grow? Or are you stagnant and you stink?
So when you look at COVID and concrete leadership and gold leadership, and the church, I mean, going to ask you more of a man of faith question now. Since you the church is called to assemble together.
Mhm.
And yeah, video is somewhat assembling, but I don't think that's what the word has in mind when it says assemble together.
Right.
So how do you think that leaders within the faith community can have people assembled together both physically and virtually to encourage people to dive into their faith,
Mhm.
and at the same time encourage people who are sitting at home to come on back to the building?
Our pastor's been very clear on this, is that, we are called to assemble, and there's nothing better than being in the house with those who love you. Now, if you've
Here,
got a medical condition, or, you're still worried about it, nobody's going to force you to do it. But what COVID did, I think, for the church, is it opened the big C church's eyes into another avenue of what the public square is. People used to gather in the public square, centuries ago, and they would preach the gospel. Well, now the public square is where we're at right now, online. That's where
yeah,
everybody is at. And I believe that there were so many churches who refused to go there that COVID forced them to go there. And so they had to up their game. They had to go, you know what? There's people out there that we're not reaching. God called us to go into all the corners of the earth. Well, the internet is a corner that we need to get into. And there were some churches doing it really well. There were some churches who weren't doing it so well. There were some churches who weren't doing it at all. And now you see the overwhelming majority of churches now have some sort of online influence. And I believe that online influence shouldn't be where it stops. We should encourage people to get back into the house.
absolutely.
But I don't think you should stop the online influence, because there will be people who are always there. I've often said, I don't care what brings you to the church, but I desperately care what you leave with. And so if it's a light show, cool. If it's because your girlfriend said we're going to church, awesome. If it's free coffee, or the fact that it's on Facebook, awesome. What are you leaving with? And how can I draw you closer to Jesus, not closer to me?
So when you look at leadership and one's faith life, I go back to your statement: if culture isn't everything, then vision is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see is the role of one's faith life, both as a concrete leader and a gold leader? Because I don't think we can say concrete leaders are faithless.
No.
They just approach things differently.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I don't know that faith has well, let me say it this way. I don't think faith is the determining factor between concrete leaders and golden leaders. Their character, their attitude, and how they approach leadership situations, that is the defining factor. Faith is a big deal to me. It's a big deal to a lot of people. It's a big deal to a lot of leaders. There's a lot of leaders out there who don't have faith in anything but themselves. I do believe that when you're in the faith world, that you're more prone to the teachings of how to be a leader in a biblical sense. And the Bible's very clear on some of the ways that you deal with conflict, the ways that you lead people. When I say if culture isn't everything, then vision is nothing, you need people to carry out your vision. I can sit here and cast vision all day long, but if my team doesn't carry it out, it's really not going to go anywhere. And if my culture is toxic, then I can cast vision and my team can throw it away and go just do what they need to do for a paycheck and just make sure that the bills are paid. But when I've got big vision, which I believe that God calls us to have big vision for our organizations as followers of Jesus, that we are supposed to have big vision. Somebody said one time, if you want to insult God, have tiny little prayers. Have big prayers.
Have a tiny little prayer?
Tiny little prayer. Just this little prayer is what I need. But God's going, come on, let's go. I can deliver so much more. And so whenever we're developing culture, have big vision, but have the big culture that helps carry out your vision. Because if culture isn't there, if your culture is toxic, then your team's not going to be apt to carry your vision very far.
No, not at all. We could go on for hours, but we've gone on for half an hour, and I'm doing my best in the weekly version of the show, especially now since it's at Friday, 4:00 Eastern, to stick to closer to half an hour before I get to this point. So Joseph, this is the point of the show where I hand it over to you for a couple minutes for you to speak on something specific And what I'd like you to talk about to launch people into their weekend is how they can be the best blend of a concrete and gold leader that they can be.
Yeah. To be honest with you, it's going to be know your team. Know your team the best that you can. Know how they tick. Know how they receive information. Know how they give information. Here we talk about Enneagram numbers. We talk about the DISC assessment. These are all personality things, Myers-Briggs and strength finders. There's 100,000 million personality tests out there that you can take, but understand how your team is wired. You need to understand how you're wired as well, but Enneagram numbers, strength finders, all of that stuff, as a leader, that's not necessarily for you. You need to lead past your personality, lead beyond your numbers, and lead to the numbers and the personalities that you lead. Understand your situation. Sometimes it takes a strong fist to go, nope, this is the way that we're going to do it. Whether you're right or wrong, but if you have been a golden leader, if you have developed the trust with your team, you have that relational equity, and you understand how they tick, then your team is going to say, all right, this is how we're going to do it this time. And when you're right, they'll celebrate you. When you're wrong, they will pick up the pieces and still be behind you and still help you achieve the mission and vision that you've set out for, because they know that you didn't set out to be wrong. You set out to be right. You set out with their best interest and the organization's best interest in mind. And sometimes it doesn't go the way that you planned, and that's okay, because we fail, but we fail forward. And when you're a golden leader, your team knows that in your concrete moments, they can back you up because you have their best interest and the organization's best interest at heart. You're not leading for yourself. You're leading for those that you lead.
I love it. I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, the book is Concrete and Gold with written. Oh, I've got it right up here already. Joe G. Cross. Head over to Amazon or Barnes and Noble to get the book. Joe, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for inviting me.
A lot of good information. I wish you well on the book. I'm sure you're going to get all kinds of sales out of it, but more importantly, influence people and have there be a concrete and gold philosophy out there for people. Awesome. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Litvak Leadership Live. Hey, and I'm going to throw something else in here. You see here how we've got like us on Facebook and on YouTube. Shannon says it's a great show. Gotta love the locals telling me that we're doing well. But we've also got here Litvak Leadership Live is part of the Megamind Network. There's a group of us in a mastermind group that we are all live streaming. And we do this thing at the end that I had not embraced. So I'm going to be gold today and embrace it. Because how do you end the show? Well, it's with a frozen hand, putting it up, waving people. So, Joe, are you ready to do the frozen hand with me?
Let's do it.
All right, everyone, have a great weekend and be blessed in all that you do. Bye now.